Hey everyone, welcome to our deep dive into Dale Carnegie. You know his book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, even though it came out way back in 1936, it's still a huge bestseller. So we're going to unpack why his advice is so timeless. But first, a little background on the man himself.
Yeah, he's a really interesting figure. He wasn't like some out-of-touch guru or anything. He actually came from really humble beginnings. Rural Missouri, born back in 1888.
Wow, so almost like the exact opposite of like a slick salesman type.
Exactly. And that probably really shaped his whole understanding of what it means to connect with people. And get this, he actually started out teaching public speaking.
Really? Public speaking. I mean, that's kind of ironic considering his book's all about relationships.
Right, it's funny, but eventually he kind of realized people were craving something more than just how to give a good speech. They wanted the skills to navigate, like all those tricky parts of relationships.
So it wasn't just about charisma or being a smooth talker. There was a deeper philosophy there.
Totally. Carnegie really believed that at the core of any strong relationship, you have to have empathy and genuine interest in the other person. And this wasn't just some tactic or trick. He saw it as like a fundamental truth about human psychology.
Okay, so walk me through that a little bit.
Well, think about it. Most people are kind of naturally preoccupied with themselves, right? It's just human nature. So when someone actually breaks that pattern and expresses sincere interest in you, it's super powerful.
I get it. It's like flipping the script on our natural self-centeredness.
Yeah.
So what were some of his core beliefs when it comes to building these strong relationships?
Well, there are actually a whole bunch, but let's just hit a few of the key ones. First, he was all about showing genuine interest in others. And I don't just mean like pretending to listen. He meant really absorbing what someone's saying, asking follow-up questions and making them feel heard. And then second, he really emphasized empathy, like actually trying to step into another person's shoes and see the world from their perspective.
Like putting on a pair of empathy glasses and really trying to understand where they're coming from.
Exactly. And then third, he was a huge believer in positive reinforcement and avoiding like harsh criticism.
Yeah.
He felt that people respond way better to encouragement than to, being torn down.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
I mean, who likes to be constantly criticized, right?
Yeah.
It's so much more empowering to feel supported and appreciated. But was it all just theory? Or did he actually offer like practical tips on how to put these beliefs into action?
Oh, he was totally about practical application. His book is packed with techniques that you can use like in everyday life.
All right, let's get to the good stuff. What are some of his most memorable techniques?
One that always sticks out is how much he emphasized remembering and using people's names. He actually said this really profound thing. He said, "A person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language." It's so simple, but we often forget to do it.
It's true. I'm totally guilty of forgetting names, and it's always so awkward when you have to ask again.
Yeah.
But why is it so important? It seems like
Yeah.
such a small detail.
It's not just about remembering a name. It's about acknowledging someone's individuality and making them feel seen. Like when you use their name, you're signaling that they're not just another face in the crowd. They're someone you value and remember.
I see what you mean. It's like you're saying, hey, you matter to me. I see you. What other techniques did he recommend?
He was a big advocate for active listening. And I'm not just talking about like nodding politely while waiting for your turn to speak. I mean, truly engaging with what the other person is saying, absorbing their words, asking follow-up questions, even reflecting back their emotions.
So it's not just about hearing, it's about understanding, but the message and the feelings behind it.
Exactly. It's showing that you're fully present and engaged in the conversation. And that creates this sense of trust and connection, which is like the foundation of any strong relationship.
I can imagine that takes practice though, right?
Right.
It's so easy to get distracted or let our minds wander during conversations.
Oh, for sure. It takes effort. But think about how good it feels when you feel truly listened to. It makes you feel valued, respected, and it encourages you to open up more.
That's so true. It's like you're giving the gift of your full attention, which is pretty powerful these days when everyone's so distracted. What about compliments? Did Carnegie think those were important for building relationships?
Absolutely. But he had a very specific take on compliments. He was all about genuine compliments, not just empty flattery. There's a big difference between saying, "Wow, that dress looks amazing on you," and saying, "I really admire your sense of style. You always seem to put together such unique and interesting outfits."
Okay, so it's not just about saying something nice. It's about being specific and thoughtful. It's about noticing and appreciating the things that make someone special.
Exactly. A genuine compliment shows that you've been paying attention and that you genuinely value the other person's qualities or contributions.
I love that. It's like you're saying, I see you and I appreciate what you bring to the table. Now, did Carnegie have any advice on how to deal with disagreements or conflicts? Because those are bound to come up in any relationship, right?
He had some really interesting thoughts on that. He was actually surprisingly averse to arguments. He felt like they often do more harm than good.
Really? That seems kind of counterintuitive. Don't healthy relationships need at least some conflict?
It's not about avoiding conflict altogether. It's about recognizing that arguments can escalate quickly and lead to resentment and damaged trust. He suggested that instead of trying to win every debate, we should focus on finding common ground and understanding the other person's perspective.
So it's more about seeking understanding and collaboration rather than trying to prove who's right or wrong.
Exactly. He recognized that relationships are often more important than being right all the time. And sometimes choosing to let go of the need to win an argument can actually strengthen the bond between two people.
That's a really interesting perspective. Makes you think about how we approach disagreements. This is all making so much sense. I'm already starting to see how these seemingly simple ideas can have a profound impact on our relationships. But I'm curious, did Carnegie ever talk about humility? It seems like that could be a really important quality in building strong, healthy connections.
He did. He actually advised people to admit their mistakes quickly and sincerely. He felt that this built trust because it showed you valued the relationship more than your ego.
That's so true. I think it can be hard for people to admit they're wrong sometimes, especially in our culture where everyone seems to be trying to project an image of perfection. But when someone owns up to their mistakes, it makes them seem more human and relatable.
For sure. It's like you're saying, hey, I'm not perfect, but I care about you enough to be honest about my shortcomings.
I love that. It's about being authentic and accountable even when it's uncomfortable. Did Carnegie have any specific techniques for encouraging others to talk about themselves? It sounds almost too simple to be effective, but I have a feeling there's more to it than meets the eye.
You're right, there's an art to it. It's not about turning every conversation into an interrogation. It's about showing genuine curiosity about their lives, their passions, and their experiences. When you ask someone about their interests, you're signaling that you value their perspective and you're eager to learn from them.
So it's like saying, hey, I think you're interesting and I want to hear more about what makes you tick. And honestly, who doesn't love to talk about the things they're passionate about? It's a natural way to connect with someone on a deeper level.
Exactly. It's a win-win. The other person feels valued and heard, and you get to learn something new and potentially discover shared interests.
This is gold. I'm already feeling inspired to level up my relationship game. But before we get too carried away, I want to shift gears a bit and talk about why Carnegie's ideas are still so relevant today. I mean, his book was published almost a century ago. What is it about his teachings that continues to resonate with people in the 21st century?
That's a great question. I mean, the world has changed so much since then. But I think there are a few key reasons why his work remains so timeless. For one, we live in a world that's increasingly digital. It's easier than ever to connect with people online, but so often those connections feel kind of superficial. We might have hundreds of Facebook friends or Instagram followers, but how many of those relationships feel truly meaningful?
Yeah, it's like we're more connected than ever, but also more disconnected at the same time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where Carnegie's emphasis on genuine connection, empathy, and active listening becomes so crucial. It's a reminder that building strong relationships takes effort, intention, and a willingness to put down our phones and engage with people on a deeper level.
Like an antidote to the digital age disconnect.
I love that. It really is. And there's another reason why Carnegie's work is so relevant today. We live in a time of such intense social and political division. It often feels like everyone's retreating into their own echo chambers, unwilling to listen to or engage with perspectives that differ from their own. Like civil discourse has become this lost art.
So how does Carnegie's work speak to that challenge?
Well, his whole approach is built on the idea of understanding and respecting different viewpoints. He emphasizes finding common ground, listening with an open mind, and avoiding unnecessary arguments. He believed that even when people disagree, they can still treat each other with respect and dignity.
It's a timely reminder that respectful disagreement is possible, even in our polarized world. But you know what? We've covered so much ground already, and I think it's time for a little break. So we're going to pause here and pick up the conversation next time. We'll continue exploring how Carnegie's ideas can help us navigate the complexities of relationships in both our personal and professional lives.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Dale Carnegie.
I'm so glad to be back. Last time we talked about some of his core beliefs and, like those practical techniques for building stronger relationships. But I kind of want to go a little deeper today.
Yeah, me too. There's always more to uncover with Carnegie. His insights are so nuanced.
One thing that really stuck with me was his emphasis on avoiding arguments. It just seems so counterintuitive. Don't you think healthy relationships need at least some level of conflict?
It's a really good point and one that comes up a lot. It's super important to remember that Carnegie wasn't saying we should avoid all conflict. Disagreements happen, right? And sometimes they're even necessary for growth. What he cautioned against was getting into arguments that become like personal attacks, or those that escalate into these big, destructive conflicts.
So it's more about like choosing our battles wisely and approaching conflict with a different mindset.
You got it. He really believed that a lot of times arguments create more resentment than resolution. So instead of always trying to win at all costs, he encouraged people to, try and understand each other, find common ground, and acknowledge the other person's perspective. I mean, remember, the goal is to preserve the relationship, not just win a debate.
That's a really good point, especially in today's world. It feels like everything is so polarized, and it's easy to get caught up in that us versus them mentality. And then we forget that we're all just, human beings
Yeah,
with different experiences and viewpoints.
so true. And I think Carnegie's approach offers like a refreshing alternative. It's about recognizing that we can disagree with someone without, demonizing them, and that finding common ground is usually way more productive than trying to force our opinions on others.
I've heard that phrase, would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? Sometimes letting go of the need to be right can actually make the relationship stronger.
100%.
And that actually leads us to another one of Carnegie's key principles, making others feel important. It seems so simple, right? But I think it's something a lot of us struggle with in our everyday interactions.
It does seem like a deceptively simple concept. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's because we get so wrapped up in our own lives, all our own worries and concerns. And we kind of forget to really see the people around us. We start to take them for granted. Or we don't take the time to acknowledge how much they do for us and the impact they have on our lives.
It's like we're so busy rushing through our to-do lists that we forget to slow down and appreciate the people who make our lives richer.
Exactly. And Carnegie really understood that making others feel important was like this key ingredient to strong, lasting relationships.
Yeah.
People want to feel validated. They want to feel like they matter, like their contributions are valued.
So how do we actually do that? I mean, how do we make people feel genuinely important? Not just like we're going through the motions. One of the best ways is just to simply acknowledge their presence. Pay attention to what they have to say, Put your phone down, make eye contact, and really listen when someone is talking to you. Ask questions. Remember details about their lives. Show that you're interested in what they have to share.
It's about being present and engaged, not just physically in the same room with them.
Exactly. It shows that you value their time and their thoughts. Another way to make people feel important is to express genuine appreciation for what they do. This could be anything from recognizing a job well done to thanking them for doing something nice for you.
Like noticing the good things people do and acknowledging them.
Yeah. And it really doesn't have to be this big, grand gesture. A simple thank you or a sincere compliment can go a long way. But what about when we need to give constructive criticism? How do we do that without making the other person feel bad or defensive?
That is a great question. Criticism is hard to get right. It's easy to sound judgmental or hurtful even when you're trying to be helpful.
For sure. And Carnegie actually had some pretty specific advice about this. He said that criticism should always be given in private and with a spirit of helpfulness, not judgment. He also thought it was really important to focus on the behavior, not the person. Instead of saying, you're always so disorganized, you could say, I noticed the files for this project weren't in their usual spot. Is there anything I can do to help you stay more organized?
That's so much better. It's not about attacking the person. It's about addressing the behavior and offering solutions.
Right. It's about offering feedback that feels supportive instead of accusatory. Another important thing is to start by acknowledging the person's strengths and the good things they do. That helps create a positive context and shows that you value them, even though you're, bringing up an area where they could improve.
Wow, that's such a good tip. It's like balancing the criticism with positive reinforcement. Speaking of positive reinforcement, I want to go back to something we touched on earlier, the importance of giving genuine compliments. I think this is something a lot of people struggle with. Either they feel awkward about it or they worry about sounding fake.
Yeah, it's interesting how something that seems so simple can be so hard for some people. But honestly, giving genuine compliments is such a powerful way to make someone's day, boost their confidence and strengthen your bond.
So what's the secret? How do you give compliments that feel real and impactful?
I think the most important thing is that the compliment has to be sincere. It has to come from a place of genuine appreciation. If you're just saying something nice because you feel like you have to or because you think that's what they want to hear, it's going to sound empty.
So it's about paying attention to the things we truly admire about people and expressing those feelings authentically.
Yeah.
Right. And it helps to be specific too. Instead of just saying, you're a great person, try saying, I really appreciate your positive attitude. It always makes me feel better when I'm around you. The more specific you are, the more meaningful it will be.
It's like going beyond the generic and finding something truly unique and special about them.
Totally. And don't forget eye contact. When you look someone in the eye and tell them something you admire, it just adds this whole other level of sincerity and connection.
It's like those nonverbal cues really amplify the message.
Exactly. And lastly, don't be afraid to give compliments. Don't hold back. I think we often worry about sounding awkward or insincere, but the truth is, most people love getting compliments. Even if it feels a little weird at first, the positive impact is way bigger than any potential discomfort.
This is great advice. I'm going to try to give more compliments this week. It's such an easy way to make people feel good and strengthen connections. But before we wrap up this part, I'd love to hear your final thoughts on what we've discussed.
You know what really strikes me is how relevant Carnegie's work still is. I mean, it was written almost 100 years ago, but in a world that's becoming more and more fast-paced and digital and often just impersonal, his focus on genuine connection and empathy and kindness feels more important than ever.
I totally agree. It's this powerful reminder that even though the world is changing so rapidly, those fundamental principles of human connection are still the same.
We all want to be seen and heard and valued, and when we make the effort to connect with each other on a deeper level, it creates this ripple effect of positivity.
That's beautifully said. Well, on that inspiring note, we'll wrap up this part of our deep dive. Come back next time and we'll explore how to use Carnegie's ideas to navigate relationships in our digital world. Welcome back to our deep dive into the wisdom of Dale Carnegie. We've covered so much ground exploring his insights on building and maintaining those strong relationships. But there's one area I really want to unpack today, is how his ideas apply to, the unique challenges of relationships in our digital age.
It's such a relevant topic. It's like we're living in this weird paradox where technology lets us connect with more people than ever, but then like real meaningful connections can feel even harder to find.
I know what you mean. It's like we're drowning in superficial connections,
Yeah.
constantly bombarded with notifications and updates. But deep down, we're craving those genuine, deeper interactions.
And the thing is, Carnegie's work, even though it was written way before social media even existed, it offers some surprisingly relevant advice for navigating all of this. One of his core principles was the importance of genuine interest in others. But in our digital world, it's easy to get caught up in presenting like this polished online persona, and we forget to actually engage with the real people behind the screens.
It's like we're all trying to project this perfect image of ourselves online. But doesn't that kind of create a barrier to authentic connection?
Exactly. Carnegie believed that real connection happens when we're willing to be vulnerable, to let our guard down, and to show up as our, imperfect selves. But that can feel scary online because judgment and criticism can be so harsh.
So how do we balance that desire for authenticity with, the risks of being vulnerable online?
Well, I think it starts with being mindful of how we're actually using technology. Are we using it to connect with people in meaningful ways? Or are we just passively consuming content and, comparing ourselves to everyone else?
It's like the difference between just scrolling through social media and actually reaching out to a friend to like schedule a video chat or even just have a phone call.
Exactly. It's about making conscious choices to use technology to make our relationships better, not to take away from them. And that might mean setting boundaries around our screen time. Maybe being more selective about who we follow online and making an effort to have conversations that feel real and meaningful.
I like that. Those are good tips. But what about protecting ourselves from all the negativity and drama that can happen online?
That's where Carnegie's advice about avoiding arguments and focusing on positive reinforcement becomes so important. It's easy to get sucked into online debates and conflicts, but as Carnegie said, they rarely lead to anything good. So instead of engaging in those online battles, we can choose to step away from the negativity and, focus our energy on building those positive connections.
It's like choosing to walk away from a fight instead of letting it escalate. We have the power to choose what we see online and to create a space that feels supportive and uplifting.
Exactly. And remember, Carnegie believed that arguments often just cause more harm than good. They can damage relationships and create resentment. So instead of trying to win every online debate, we can choose to focus on understanding different perspectives and finding common ground. It's about building bridges, not walls.
I love that metaphor. And it reminds us that we don't have to engage with every single thing we see online.
Yeah.
We can choose to focus on the things that bring us joy and connection and just let go of the rest.
And one more thing I think is worth mentioning is the importance of being mindful of our online persona. It's easy to get caught up in presenting a perfect curated image of ourselves, but that can actually make it harder to form real connections.
Yeah, it's like we're all trying to keep up with the Joneses online,
Mm,
but those curated personas are often just a facade. They don't show the full picture of who we are.
right. And when we get caught up in trying to be perfect online, it can make us feel like we can't be our true selves around other people, both online and offline. It
Yeah.
creates this barrier to vulnerability and authenticity, which are so important for meaningful relationships.
So it's about finding that balance between being authentic, but also being mindful of the impact our online presence has on others. It's about being thoughtful about what we share and how we interact, while also being true to ourselves.
You put it perfectly. It's a balancing act. But I think Carnegie's principles can help us navigate it all, the complexities of relationships in our digital age.
This has been such a great conversation. I feel like we've gained so much insight into how Carnegie's ideas can help us build stronger, more meaningful relationships. And not just online, but offline too.
I agree. It's incredible how relevant his wisdom still is, even in today's world.
Absolutely. And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the world of Dale Carnegie. I hope you enjoyed exploring his ideas with us
Yeah.
and that you feel inspired to put some of his wisdom into practice in your own life. Thanks for joining us.